Hey, good morning, everybody. So we are kind of finishing up this whole exponent stuff before we take it and use it a little more. So today we're talking zero exponent property and negatives. We've already discussed the zero property. Remember, anything to the property of zero. If it's a number, it doesn't matter, it's still one. If it's a fraction in parentheses, like that, if it's a variable, like it's also just one. So that's something that's easy to solve for. Okay, so again, 245 to the power of 0 is just 1. Now be careful for number 2. 8x y to the power of 0, that's the only part that's 1. The 8x is still there, so that's 8 times x times 1 is just 8x. Be careful in that one. Okay? Okay. Now, again, this part is the only one that's 1. That 2 and the b is still there, so that's just 2b. Okay? Now, I'm moving this down just to make it a little easier. This is the only part that's 1. So that's 1d squared over d to the 6th. Okay, that 1 isn't really needed. You can write it down. Where's the bigger exponent? And subtract them from the other day. Okay, next, zero exponents. So here's kind of the rule. If your exponent is negative and it's on the top of the fraction, move it to the bottom. If it's on a negative exponent on the bottom of a fraction, move it to the top of the fraction. That movement takes care of that negative. So think of this as over 1. So now do you see when I move that 2 to the power of negative 4 to the other part of the fraction, takes care of that negative, and then you just solve. Same thing here. Do you see this negative exponent means you move it to the top of the fraction, and then that negative goes away. So this basically means, and I hope you have your calculator, 3 to the power of 4, that's the same thing as saying 3 to the power of 4 over 1. This is saying 3 to the negative 4 over 1, but I don't want a negative exponent. Now that has to go to the other part of the fraction, okay? And then the negative exponent goes away. And then I put 3 to the power of 4 in my calculator. This one's 81. This one is 1 over 81. A negative exponent does not mean you're going to have a negative answer. Okay, this means 1 over negative 9 to the power of 2. Okay, this means 1 over negative 9 in parentheses, sorry about that, to the power of negative 2. Now be careful, if you put these in your calculator, this side really means negative 9 times 9. That's actually that answer. This one on the right means 1 over negative 9. Whoops, I should not see. I do the mistake too. That becomes a positive exponent when I move it. And this is a negative 9 times a negative 9, which is positive. So if that is in the parentheses, that is not in parentheses. So that's why that one stays negative, but this one goes away. Okay, try that out in your calculator. It's the same thing. Okay, here we go. Ready? First things first. Write that like we did the other day. Now we're going to simplify 6 and 2 to become 3 and 1. And I'm going to rewrite that right away, 3 and 1. Now, n squared stays n squared. Now, do you see n to the power of negative 3? To get rid of that negative, I move it from the bottom. to the top. So then my final answer, because anything over 1 doesn't really need to be that, and typically we see variables in alphabetical order. So we want m's to be first. Okay, let's do the same thing here. Write this side by side. So again, the 7 and the 14 becomes 1 over 2. Okay, then I'm going to start with the top. That has to move to the bottom, but the y to the power of 1 stays. Now I worry about the bottom. X to the power of 3 is positive. I don't move it, but the y has to move to the top to get rid of that negative. Remember, all you're doing is moving it, and that changes from a negative to a positive. Now, do you see I have 1 y to the 4th and 2 x to the 5th by using my rules I've learned over the past few days. Adding exponents, not multiplying. Okay, let's see here. Take out your worksheet. That means that 5 to the power of 3 has to go on the bottom. And then that exponent goes from a negative to a positive, and 5 to the power of 3 is 5 times 5 times 5, which is 1 over 125. Okay, same thing here. Make it a fraction to start. Now that has to go on the bottom of the fraction, and the exponent becomes positive. The base doesn't change. I do need something on the top of that fraction. Now, in parentheses in your calculator, put -4 end parentheses to the power of 3, and this one is going to be a -64 because it's a negative times a negative times a negative. Ooh, 16 is that tricky kind. Okay, that means I'm moving this -2 down. The negative stays for the base number, but the power becomes a +4. I need something on the top of that fraction. Okay, now this means the negative and then 2 times 2 times 2. So not in parentheses. That gives me -16. Think about that. Okay. Okay, we're going to do a couple more. Now again, make this into a fraction. So the 7 and the a are left because they both have like +1 exponents is what I've been telling you. The b has to move to get rid of that negative exponent. Okay, and that's all we can do because we don't have any like bases. Okay, now number 23. Do you see this 2 has a power of -1? I move it and take rid of the negative, take the negative and go away. The x has to be moved. Now it's a +3. The y on the bottom is positive to start, so I don't move it. And I put a 1 on the top. So it's really just 1 over 2x to the 3rd, y to the 8th. Ooh, this is tricky. Okay, last one on this page. The -8 is not in parentheses, but it's power of -2. I have to move it because the power is negative. The 5 has a exponent that's negative. I have to move it. The c is really just a 1. And the d to the power of 0, anything to the power of 0, goes away. Okay, now I'm not quite done. 5 to the power of 1 is just 5. -8, the negative is not in the parentheses, so it stays. And 8 times 8 is 64. And that c to the power of 1, or just c, is still there. Whew. Okay, now finish your worksheet, check it, and do the formative in Schoology, please. Okay, have a great day.